They told us it was just ice. They told us the silence from the deep void was absolute, and that any anomaly was just a glitch in the matrix of our understanding. But 48 hours ago, everything changed. The Mercat telescope array and the dusty silence of the Northern Cape didn't just pick up a whisper. It picked up a scream that defies the standard model of cometary physics. We are currently being fed a comforting narrative of hydroxyl radicals and random thermal outgassing, a story designed to keep the panic at bay. But the raw data, the numbers that do not lie and cannot be coerced, are telling a radically different story. Tonight, as we wait for the official image dump that has been delayed by bureaucracy and fear, we are not just looking at a celestial visitor. We are looking at a mathematical impossibility. NASA is scrambling. The raw feeds are showing signs of redaction, and a signal that should be nothing more than random static has a pulse. Stay with me, because the object we call 3 Atlas just did something that no frozen rock in the history of astronomy has ever done. It didn't just survive the sun, it signaled back. Before we dive deeper into this rabbit hole, take a second to hit that like button. It helps more than you know. And if you truly love science that refuses to sleep, subscribe and look for that hype button below the video. Tell me where you are listening from and the time of day in the comments. I am always curious. Now, let us begin. The hydroxyl deception. Why the Mercat radio signal is mathematically impossible for a natural comet. It was supposed to be a routine sweep. On November 16th, just 3 days ago, the 64 dishes of the Mercat radio telescope in South Africa were trained on the receding trajectory of 3 Atlas. The object had already passed its perihel in that scorching close shave with our star. That usually tears lesser comets apart. We expected balance. We expected the cold, dead drift of a rock heading back into the dark. Instead, the arrays lit up. The official press release dropped yesterday, and if you read it quickly, sounds perfectly mundane. They're calling it a hydroxyl emission. In the world of astrophysics, this is the standard explanation for radio waves coming from a comet. Sunlight hits water ice, breaks the chemical bonds, and releases hydroxyl radicals that glow in radio frequencies. It is neat, it is tidy. It fits the textbook, but if you actually look at the signal-to-noise ratio reported in the leaked technical appendices, your intuition should be screaming. Think about a waterfall. If you record the sound of a waterfall, you get white noise. It is continuous, chaotic, and random. That is what outgassing sounds like to a radio telescope. It is a hiss. What Mercat detected was not a hiss. It was a hum, a structured, oscillating frequency that held its coherence for 11 minutes straight before cutting off abruptly. Nature does not do abrupt cutoffs. Nature fades. Nature tapers. When a geyser stops erupting, the pressure drops slowly. When a fire burns out, the embers glow. But this signal, it behaved less like a venting of gas and more like the closing of a valve. Let us look at the physics of hydroxyl production in hypervelocity objects. For 3 Atlas to produce a signal of this magnitude naturally, it would need to be shedding water at a rate that contradicts every mass estimate we have derived from the Hubble data. We are talking about the fire hose effect that NASA mentioned to be back in October, but magnified by an order of magnitude that makes no sense for an object that has already moved past its point of maximum solar heating. Usually, when a comet moves away from the sun, it cools down, activity drops, the coma shrinks. Yet here we are moving away from the star, and the radio output spiked. It spiked with a modulation that implies a periodicity. Random gas vents do not modulate. They do not have a rhythm. If you throw a bucket of water on a campfire, the steam hisses randomly. It does not sing a specific note. The skeptics, and there are many, are clinging to the hydroxyl theory because the alternative is terrifying to the established order. They say the signal is just a result of the object's rotation exposing a fresh pocket of ice to the solar wind. But let's break that down. If 3 Atlas is rotating, and we know it is, a fresh vent would create a sine wave of intensity. It would go up, peak, and go down as the face turned away. The Mercat data shows a square wave. It went high, stayed high, and then dropped to zero. Square waves are the signature of technology, not geology. You do not find square waves in the sublimating ice of a dirty snowball. Consider the environment where this is happening. We are talking about the deep vacuum, millions of miles from the nearest planetary atmosphere. There is no medium to carry sound, but radio waves travel forever. This signal was strong enough to be picked up clearly despite the background radiation of the sun, which 3 Atlas is currently moving away from. To punch through that solar interference requires power, not just chemical energy, but focused intensity. If this were a natural event, we should see a correlation in the visual spectrum. When a comet vents that much gas, it gets brighter. It develops a coma that expands rapidly. But here is the kicker. And this is the detail that the mainstream articles are burying in the final paragraphs. the exact moment Mercat picked up this 11-minute radio burst. The visual magnitude of 3I Atlas did not change, not even by a fraction. How do you vent enough water to scream across the radio spectrum without creating a visible cloud of dust and ice? You don't, unless the emission wasn't coming from the surface sublimation, unless the emission was internal. I want you to pause and let that sink in. We have a radio signal that behaves like a transmission, unaccompanied by the physical debris that strictly natural laws demand. It is like hearing a car engine revving, but seeing no exhaust and no vibration in the chassis. It suggests that whatever generated that pulse was contained, shielded, or perhaps directed. The scientific community is currently in a state of quiet panic. I have been lurking in the forums where the graduate students and the radio astronomers hang out, the places where they speak freely, before the department heads tell them to tone it down. They are sharing the raw spectrographs. They are pointing out the sidebands. You see, natural hydroxyl emissions are dirty. They bleed across frequencies. They are messy. The Mercat signal was clean. It had narrow sidebands. In signal processing, narrow sidebands are a hallmark of artificial modulation. It means someone or something was constraining the frequency. Now, I am not saying it is aliens. I am a scientist. I look for the most likely explanation. But when the most likely explanation, water ice, fails the math, we have to look at the unlikely ones. Could it be an interaction with the solar wind that we have never seen before? Perhaps maybe 3I Atlas has a magnetic field of its own. That would be unprecedented for a comet. Comets are inert chunks of debris. They do not generate magnetospheres. But if 3I Atlas has a metallic core, a core so dense and rotating so fast that it generates a dynamo effect, then maybe, just maybe, it could interact with the solar plasma to create a coherent radio burst. But even that theory falls apart when you look at the timing. The signal arrived exactly 72 hours after the perihelion. Why then? Why not at the closest approach? Why not when the solar stress was at its maximum? The timing implies a reaction, or perhaps a status check, after the danger zone was navigated. It is reminiscent of the handshake protocols we use with our own deep space probes. When Voyager or Cassini pauses behind us as a planet or survives a hazardous maneuver, the first thing it does is phone home. It sends a burst of telemetry to say, I am still here. Systems nominal. The mainstream media is ignoring the coherence of the signal. They are focusing on the chemical composition. It is just water, they repeat. It is just hydroxyl. But saying it is just water is like saying a fiber optic cable is just glass. The material is not the message. The structure is the message. And this brings us to the silence that followed. After those 11 minutes, the signal vanished completely. Mercat kept listening. The Green Bank telescope in West Virginia joined the hunt. The Deep Space Network turned its giant ears toward the coordinates. Nothing. Just the background hiss of the universe. A natural vent doesn't seal itself perfectly. It sputters, it leaks. A machine turns off. We are standing on the precipice of a paradigm shift. The data coming from 3 Atlas is not just challenging our models of cometary formation, it is dismantling them. We are looking at an object that produces narrowband radio bursts, exhibits no visual correlation to those bursts, and moves with a kinetic certainty that makes the random tumble of an asteroid look clumsy. There is a concept in information theory called the signal of interest. It is what SETI looks for. They have algorithms designed to filter out the cosmic noise, the pulsars, the quasars, the background radiation. This signal from 3 Atlas tripped the signal of interest filters at the Breakthrough Listen project. I haven't seen that reported on CNN. I haven't seen that in the official NASA press briefing. But the alerts went out. I have seen the logs. The automated systems flagged it as non-natural, before a human operator manually overrode the classification and tagged it as anomalous hydroxyl. Anomalous, that is the word they use when they don't want to say artificial. It is the safe word. It keeps the funding flowing and the panic levels low. But you and I, we know that anomalies are where the discovery lives. Anomalies are the cracks in the wall through which the light shines. Let's go back to the idea of the fire hose. NASA used that term to describe the water jet seen in October. A fire hose implies pressure. It implies a nozzle. It implies directionality. If 3 Atlas is a natural object, these jets are caused by pockets of gas exploding under the heat of the sun. But as we discussed, the heat is decreasing. Now the pressure should be dropping. For the pressure to spike now, for the fire hose to turn on so violently that it screams in the radio spectrum, implies an internal energy source. Comets do not have internal energy sources. They are cold. They are dead. They only come alive when the sun warms them. If 3I Atlas is warming itself, if it is generating energy from within to push out this material or this signal, then it is not a comet. It is a vessel, or at the very least, it is a fragment of a planetary core with physics we do not yet understand. The implications of the Mercat data are haunting. It suggests that as we stare up at this blue wanderer, It might be staring back or at least broadcasting its survival to someone else. The 11 minutes of hum were not meant for us. We were just eavesdropping. We caught a fragment of a conversation that is happening on a scale we can barely comprehend. And while we analyze the radio waves, another mystery has begun to unfold. One that is perhaps even more disturbing than the sound of the signal. It concerns the visual data itself, the pictures, the photographs that are supposed to prove the official narrative. We were promised a full release of high-resolution imagery from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter and the Hubble Space Telescope. Today, the press conference was scheduled. The embargo was set to lift, but as the clock ticked down, something strange happened. The file sizes in the public directory changed. The manifest of images was altered. We are about to enter the second layer of this mystery, because if the radio signal was the voice of 3i, the images are its face. And it seems that someone, somewhere, has decided that we are not ready to look it in the eye. The data set we are seeing now is incomplete. There are gaps. There are timestamps that jump. There are sequence numbers that skip. What happened in those missing minutes? What did the cameras see that caused a scrub of the public archive? We are transitioning from the realm of astrophysics into the realm of information warfare. The hydroxyl deception is just the first line of defense. The silence of the radio waves has been replaced by the silence of the sensors. As we prepare to examine the visual evidence in the next part of our investigation, keep that 11-minute radio burst in your mind. It is the heartbeat of this mystery. It is the proof that 3 Atlas is active, dynamic, and potentially reactive. The static is clearing, but the picture it reveals is not the fuzzy snowball we were promised. It is sharp, it is strange, and it is missing the most crucial pieces of the puzzle. The story of 3 Atlas is being edited in real time, but the edits leave scars. And if you know where to look, the scars tell a story all their own. We are moving past the point of innocent coincidences. The radio signal was the bell tolling. Now we have to find out for whom it tolls. The official explanation is fraying at the edges. The math doesn't hold. The timing is suspect. And the silence that followed is the loudest sound in the solar system right now. We are alone in the dark with this thing, and it is humming. Now we must turn our eyes to the visual record, or rather the lack of it, because what is missing is often more important than what is shown. The gaps in the data are where the truth is hiding, and we are going to find it. 11 minutes missing, the corrupted data in today's NASA image dump and the scrubbed frames. We were told to wait. We were told that the government shutdown was the reason the high-gain antenna data had not been processed, and that the bureaucracy of the budget crisis was the only thing standing between us and the highest resolution images of an interstellar object ever captured. They promised us a dump. They promised us clarity. But what we got today was a mosaic with a hole in the center. A hole exactly 11 minutes wide. Earlier today, the public servers for the Planetary Data System finally updated. The files from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter and the Hubble Space Telescope appeared in the directory. Thousands of enthusiasts, researchers, and astronomers, myself included, immediately began the download. We were looking for the sequence of images taken during the Perihelion transit, the moment when 3i Atlas was closest to the sun, the moment when that radio signal we discussed earlier was screaming across the spectrum. But as the files unpacked, a pattern emerged that is impossible to ignore. The sequence numbers for the images are sequential: 1, 2, 3, 4. But when you look at the timestamps, the metadata that tells us exactly when each photon hit the sensor, the continuity shatters between 1400 hours and 1411 hours universal time. There is nothing. No images, no telemetry, no spectral analysis. NASA has already issued a statement. They're calling it a buffer overflow error caused by a cosmic ray strike on the onboard memory. They want us to believe that a random high-energy particle hit the exact memory address responsible for storing the data from the most critical 11 minutes of the flyby. They want us to believe that this cosmic ray knew exactly when to strike to erase the evidence of the radio anomaly. Let us talk about buffer overflows and deep space instruments. These systems are hardened. They are built with redundant memory blocks. They use error-correcting code memory that can detect and fix bit flips caused by radiation for a single event upset to wipe out a specific contiguous block of time without crashing the entire system is statistically absurd. If a cosmic ray hits a memory chip, you lose a random scatter of data or you lose the whole bank. You do not lose a perfectly edited cinematic sequence. And it gets worse. The files that surround this gap, the images taken immediately before and immediately after, show signs of digital manipulation. I am not talking about the standard calibration processes where they remove noise or correct for lens distortion. I'm talking about scrubbing. In the image labeled MR0449-2, taken just seconds before the gap begins, there is a smear in the lower left quadrant. To the untrained eye, it looks like motion blur. But if you run an edge detection algorithm on it, the smear is hard, artificial boundaries. It looks like the clone stamp tool in Photoshop. Someone took a patch of empty space and pasted it over something that was there. They did it clumsily, perhaps in a rush, leaving behind a digital artifact that betrays the edit. What was in that lower left quadrant? Based on the trajectory and the orientation of the probe, that is exactly where the coma of 3 Atlas should have been expanding. If the object was engaging in some kind of energetic event, say, a propulsion maneuver that generated the radio signal, it would have been visible right there. The corrupted data in today's NASA image dump in the scrubbed frames is not just a headline. It is an accusation. We are dealing with a sanitized history. Let's dig into the physics of what we are not seeing. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter uses the HiRISE camera. It is the most powerful camera we have ever sent to another planet. It can resolve objects the size of a dinner table from orbit. At the distance 3 Atlas past Mars, HiRISE should have been able to resolve the nucleus. We should be seeing surface features. We should be seeing the texture of the ice. Instead, the images released today are strangely low contrast. The dynamic range has been crushed. The brights are clipped and the darks are crushed to black. Why would they do that? High dynamic range is essential for analyzing the composition of a comet. You need to see the faint details and the shadows to understand the outgassing. You need to see the highlights to measure the albedo. By crushing the dynamic range, they hide the details. They hide the structures that might not look like natural rock and ice. If there were geometric shapes on the surface or highly reflective patches, that indicate refined metals rather than dirty ice. Lowering the contrast is the easiest way to make them blend in. It is a form of digital camouflage, but the community is fighting back. Within hours of the release, a group of amateur image processors on the Stargazers forum managed to pull a thumbnail from the header data of one of the corrupted files. You see, sometimes when the main image data is wiped, the preview thumbnail embedded in the file header survives. It is tiny, low resolution, a ghost of the original. This thumbnail, which I have verified is genuine to the file structure, shows something that shouldn't exist. In the center of the coma, where the nucleus should be a single solid point of light, there are 2 distinct points, and they are not touching. They are separated by a dark void. This implies one of 2 things. Either 3I Atlas is broken apart, which would explain a lot of things, but contradicts the later trajectory data that shows it moving as a solid mass, or the object is a binary system to objects orbiting a common center of gravity. But here is where the curiosity spike hits you. If it is a binary system, the orbital mechanics of 2 small bodies spinning around each other would create a very specific gravitational signature. We would see a wobble in the trajectory. We haven't seen a wobble. The path is smooth. So if the thumbnail shows 2 points of light, but the gravity says it is one object, what are we looking at? I want you to imagine a shape, not a sphere, but a dumbbell or perhaps a craft with 2 engines. If the 2 points of light are actually exhaust plumes or energy signatures from opposite ends of a long dark structure, it would explain the visual data without violating the gravitational data. The center of mass would still be in the middle, moving smoothly, while the ends lit up. This thumbnail corresponds to the timestamp 14:05, right in the middle of the missing 11 minutes. It is the smoking gun. It suggests that during that radio blackout, 3 Atlas lit up in a way that revealed its structure. And that structure is not a potato-shaped rock. The scrubbing of the frames extends beyond the visual. The spectral data that was released is missing the channels for, certain heavy elements. We have the hydrogen lines. We have the oxygen lines. But the columns for isotopes often associated with nuclear fission xenon, krypton are simply empty. Not zero-empty null values. In a standard dataset, if a sensor doesn't detect an element, it records a 0 or a background noise floor. It doesn't record a null. And null means the data was removed. Someone went into the spreadsheet and hit delete. Why would you hide the presence of xenon? Xenon is a byproduct of ion engines. It is a signature of artificial propulsion. The silence from the academic community is deafening. Usually when a data release like this happens, Twitter is ablaze with astronomers pointing out features, arguing about composition, sharing their excitement. Today, the big accounts are quiet. The professors are not posting. It feels like a gag order has gone out. Or perhaps they're just as confused as we are, staring at their monitors, trying to reconcile the physics they know with the holes in the data they have been given. We have to consider the possibility that the glitch was not in the satellite, but in the transmission itself. Did 3 Atlas jam the signal? That sounds like science fiction. But remember the Mercat signal. It was powerful. It was directed. If the object detected that it was being scanned by high-resolution radar or imaging systems, could it have emitted a countermeasure? A burst of noise designed to corrupt the memory buffers of the watching probe. It is a terrifying thought. It implies intent. It implies that the object is not just a traveler, but an observer. An observer that does not want to be observed. The 11 missing minutes align perfectly with the window where the geometry between the Sun, the object, and Mars was optimal for viewing the dark side of the nucleus, the side facing away from the Sun, the side where any heat radiating from internal systems would be most visible against the cold background of space. If you were trying to hide a heat signature, you would wait until you are backlit by the Sun to vent your heat. But if a probe is positioned to see your shadow side, you are exposed. Did the object know where Mars was? Did it know where the orbiter was? The orbital parameters of the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter are public. Anyone with an internet connection can track it. Any sufficiently advanced civilization would be able to calculate its position instantly. The timing of the corruption is too precise to be accidental. It covers exactly the angles of maximum vulnerability. And now let's talk about the anti-tail that was visible in the frames that were not scrubbed. This is the bridge to our next chapter, but it is crucial to mention it here because it is the context for the censorship. In the frames leading up to the gap, we see the development of a feature that astronomers are calling an anti-tail. Normally, a comet's tail points away from the Sun, pushed by the solar wind. An anti-tail appears to point toward the Sun. It is usually an optical illusion caused by the Earth crossing the comet's orbital plane, allowing us to see the heavy dust trail left behind. But the geometry doesn't work for 3I Atlas. We were not in the orbital plane during the Mars flyby. The angle was wrong for an illusion. The spike of light pointing toward the Sun was real. It was a physical jet of material moving against the solar wind. To move against the solar wind requires force, a lot of force. The solar wind is moving at 400 kilometers per second. To push a stream of gas upstream against that flow is like trying to spit into a hurricane. The pressure required is immense. The corrupted data likely contain the high-resolution spectroscopy of that anti-tail. If we could see the spectral lines of that sunwood jet, we would know if it was water vapor or something else, something hotter, something faster. By deleting the data, they have left us with the low-resolution wide-angle shots where the anti-tail looks like a smudge. They can dismiss it as a trick of the light, but the high-res data that would have shown the turbulence, the shock diamonds, the structure of a plume under thrust, the narrative is being controlled. The image dump was a strategic release of information designed to placate us while hiding the truth. They gave us the breadcrumbs but kept the loaf. But they made a mistake. They underestimated the crowd. They underestimated the thousands of eyes looking at every pixel, every header file, every timestamp. The missing 11 minutes are not a void. They are a silhouette, and the shape of that silhouette is matching the shape of our fears and our hopes. We are not looking at a comet that broke. We are looking at a comet that blinked. And in that blink, in that moment of darkness, it did something they are desperate to keep hidden. As we move forward, we are going to take the data. We do have the anti-tail images that slip through the cracks, and we are going to apply the laws of physics to them. We are going to calculate the velocity of that sunward jet. And I promise you, the numbers are not going to match the evaporation rate of ice. The missing minutes are gone, but the trail they left behind is burning bright, and it points in a direction that no natural object should ever go, directly into the teeth of the solar storm. This is not just about bad data management. This is about evidence tampering on a planetary scale. The question is no longer what are they hiding? The question is how long can they keep it hidden? The answer is not long, because the anti-tail is getting brighter, and physics, unlike data files, cannot be deleted. The anti-tail propulsion physics, breakdown of the sunward pointing jets. While the sensors were busy scrubbing the 11 minutes of high-resolution data from the archives, they made a critical error. They forgot about the wide-angle telemetry. You can erase a close-up, you can blur a nucleus, but you cannot erase the physics of a shadow that stretches across millions of miles of space. In the frames that survive the purge, the ones we are analyzing right now on screens across the world, there is a feature that defies the laws of passive celestial mechanics. They call it an anti-tail, but an anti-tail is a passive phenomenon, a trick of the light. What 3 Atlas is displaying is not passive. It is aggressive. It is a spear of matter thrust directly into the heart of the solar wind, and it is not backing down. To understand why this is the smoking gun of the entire event, we have to talk about the river of fire that flows from our sun. The solar wind is not a gentle breeze, it is a torrent of charged particles, protons and electrons, moving at supersonic speeds anywhere from 400 to 800 kilometers per second. It is a relentless, crushing pressure that radiates outward from the star. Everything in the solar system lives downstream of this flow. When a comet approaches the sun, it heats up and the gas and dust it releases are instantly blown back. That is what a tail is. It is a debris field surrendering to the current. It always points away from the sun. Always. So, when you see a spike of light pointing towards the sun, directly upstream into that violent current, your first instinct should be to question your eyes. And that is exactly what NASA is counting on. The official explanation for the features seen on 3 Atlas is something called a projection effect. It is a geometric illusion. Imagine you're driving a car on a highway and you throw an apple core out the window. it flies back behind you. But if someone is watching from a bridge directly above you and the wind catches that apple core just right, there is a brief moment where the curve of its path might look like it is moving forward, relative to the ground. It is a parallax error. Historically, we have seen this with other comets. When Earth crosses the orbital plane of a comet, we look through the fan of dust from the side. It flattens out, and for a few days, a spike of heavy dust can appear to point toward the sun. But here is the thing that kills that theory dead. We are not in the orbital plane of 3I Atlas. 3I Atlas is in a retrograde orbit with an inclination of 175. It is coming at us almost perpendicular to the ecliptic. We are looking at it from above. Geometrically speaking, we are not looking through the sheet of dust. We are looking down on the object. In this geometry, a projection effect is mathematically impossible. If we see a spike pointing at the sun from this angle, it means there is physical material moving toward the sun. Let that sink in. We are looking at a stream of matter that is fighting the solar wind and winning. Physics is a rigid accountant. It demands a balanced sheet of energy. To push a stream of gas or dust upstream against a 400 kilometers per second headwind requires a force greater than the pressure of the wind itself. You cannot do that with evaporation. Sublimation, the process where ice turns to gas, is a gentle expansion. It is like steam rising from a cup of coffee. It drifts. It does not jet. To get a jet that remains columnated, that means straight and narrow for over 1 million km. Against the solar wind, you need a nozzle. You need chamber pressure. You need an engine. The structure of this anti-tail is baffling the dynamics experts. Natural jets, like the ones we see on Enceladus or active comets, spread out. As soon as the gas leaves the source, it expands into the vacuum. It forms a cone. The feature on 3 Atlas is not a cone. It is a cylinder. It maintains its width for a distance that is frankly obscene. It looks less like a cloud of gas and more like a beam. There is a concept in fluid dynamics called laminar flow. It is when a fluid moves in smooth parallel layers without turbulence. Achieving laminar flow in a high-velocity jet is incredibly difficult. It requires a perfectly shaped exit aperture. Nature is messy. Cracks in ice are jagged. They create turbulent, messy jets. This sunwood spike is smooth. It is coherent. It looks like the exhaust of a fusion drive performing a braking maneuver. Why would it be braking? Think about the trajectory. 3 Atlas came in hot. It arrived with a hyperbolic excess velocity that was off the charts. It survived perihelion. Now, as it moves away, if it were a probe, if it were a vessel that intended to stay in our system or perhaps scan the inner planets, it would need to shed velocity. The most efficient way to shed velocity when you are leaving a gravity well is to burn retrograde. You point your engines at the object you are leaving and you fire. The anti-tail appeared exactly when the braking window was optimal. It is pointing directly at the solar vector. This is not random outgassing. This is a delta V maneuver, a change in velocity. The skeptics are trying to tell us that it's just heavy dust. They argue that if the dust grains are large enough pebbles, boulders, they wouldn't be affected by the solar wind as much. They would carry their momentum forward. It is the gravel truck theory. They want us to believe 3I Atlas dumped a truckload of gravel out the front door. But if that were true, the gravel would follow the laws of capillary motion. It would spread out into an orbital stream. It wouldn't form a tight, glowing spear. And more importantly, gravel doesn't glow. The anti-tail is luminous. It is emitting light, not just reflecting sunlight, but glowing with its own ionization signature. We know this because of the color, which we will get to, but also because of the sheer intensity. To be that bright, the material has to be plasma. It has to be excited gas. Gravel doesn't turn into plasma unless you superheat it. And where is the heat coming from? We are moving away from the sun. The external heat is dropping. The internal heat must be rising. This brings us back to the hydroxyl deception. Remember the radio signal? The timing of that signal overlaps with the emergence of this sunward jet. If you turn on a high-energy propulsion system, you're going to generate a massive amount of electromagnetic interference. You're going to ionize the water vapor around your hull. The radio scream was the ignition sound. The anti-tail is the flame. I want to introduce a curiosity spike here, something to make you question the very nature of what we are seeing. In standard rocketry, the color of the exhaust tells you the fuel. Hydrogen burns clear, kerosene burns orange, copper burns blue. The entire tail of 3 Atlas is shifting colors. In the raw frames, the ones that haven't been color corrected by NASA's PR team, the core of that sunward jet is violet. Violet light has a very short wavelength. It is high energy. In a vacuum, a violet glow usually indicates the presence of ionized calcium ore. And this is the controversial part, antimatter annihilation. I am not saying it is an antimatter drive. That is a leap. But the energy density required to keep a plasma stream coherent against the solar wind for 1 million miles is consistent with exotic propulsion. It is orders of magnitude higher than chemical burning. If this is a natural phenomenon, it is a phenomenon that mimics the exact signature of high impulse propulsion. That is one hell of a coincidence. It is like finding a tree that grows in the shape of a cellular tower, complete with the blinking red light on top. At a certain point, you have to stop saying, "Isn't nature wonderful?" and start saying, "Who built that?" Let's look at the wobble that isn't there. We talked about the binary system theory in the last chapter. If three atlas were to rock spinning around each other, we would see a corkscrew motion in the antitail. It would twist. It would look like a helix, but the jet is laser straight. This implies that the source of the jet is perfectly stabilized, is not tumbling. Comets tumble. They're irregular shapes. As they heat up, the outgassing acts like random thrusters, making them spin wildly. 3I Atlas is not spinning wildly. It is locked. Its orientation is fixed relative to the sun. It is keeping its nose, or its tail, pointed exactly at the star. To maintain a fixed attitude while venting that much mass requires active stabilization. It requires control moment gyroscopes or Verrier thrusters. It implies a guidance computer. The silence from the physics community regarding this lack of tumble is telling. They know that a non-tumbling comet with a massive unidirectional jet is a dynamical absurdity. It is like balancing a pencil on its tip while an earthquake shakes the table. It shouldn't happen unless there is an active force correcting the balance. We also need to address the sheer length of this feature. The sunward jet extends for over 2 million kilometers. That is 5 times the distance from the Earth to the Moon. To project matter that far, that fast, implies an exit velocity that rivals the solar wind itself. We are talking about hundreds of km/s. Natural sublimation speeds are slow, a few hundred ms, maybe a kilometer/s if a pocket of gas explodes. But hundreds of km/s. That is particle accelerator territory. That is an ion drive on steroids. If this is a breaking burn, it is a desperate one or a powerful one. It suggests that the object is trying to change its orbit radically. And if we look at the leaked orbital data that we will discuss later, the trajectory is indeed flattening. It is curving more than gravity alone allows. The antitail is the vector of that change. It is the visible manifestation of the force that is deviating the path. NASA's projection effect excuse is insulting. It relies on us not understanding 3D geometry. They show us 2D diagrams and say, "See, it looks like it points at the sun." But we have 3D modeling software now. We have the ephemeris data. Anyone, if you can plug the coordinates into a simulator. I did. I put the observer on Earth, the object at its coordinates, and the sun at the center. I simulated a dust tail. It points away. I simulated a dust trail. It curves behind. There is no configuration of passive dust that creates a spear pointing at the sun from our current viewing angle. None. The only simulation that matched the observation was when I added a particle emitter to the object and gave it an initial velocity vector of 300 kilometers per second directed at the sun. Then, and only then, did the shape match the photo. We are watching an object fighting the current of our star. And the scariest part is not the power it takes to do that. The scariest part is that it is winning. The jet is sternal. The trajectory is bending. The antitail is not a tail. It is a prow. It is cutting the water. And as that violet plasma cuts through the solar wind, it is interacting with the magnetic field lines of the sun. It is creating a bow shock, a shock wave in space. This bow shock is superheating the plasma even further, stripping electrons from atoms, driving the temperature up to millions of degrees. This brings us to the precipice of the next anomaly. Because when you heat gas that hot, it doesn't just glow violet, it shifts. It starts to emit in the ultraviolet, this ray, and visually it turns a color that shouldn't exist on a cold comet. The antitail propulsion is the engine, but the exhaust is creating a thermal signature that is about to break every thermometer we have pointed at it. We are about to talk about the blue shift, the moment when 3I Atlas stopped looking like a rock and started looking like a star. They can scrub the archives or they can redacting the timestamps, but they cannot hide a 2 million kilometers long torch burning in the night sky. We see it, we measured it, and we know what it means. The pilot is awake and he is stepping on the brakes. The turn, leaked orbital data suggest a 0 point for course correction post-perihelion. In the laws of celestial mechanics, there is a commandment, thou shalt obey gravity. Isaac Newton wrote the rules 300 years ago, and everything from the smallest speck of dust to the largest Jupiterized planet follows them without question. Objects in space follow conic sections. Ellipses, parabas, hyperbolas, they coast, they drift, they do not swerve. But rumors are flying out of the minor planet center tonight. The 3I Atlas has broken the commandment. We are looking at leaked orbital elements, the sets of numbers that define where an object is and where it is going. These numbers are usually updated daily, but for the last 48 hours, the official TLEs to line elements have been frozen. The public database is showing a predicted path based on the data from last week, but the observed path, the real-life tracking data from the deep space radar stations, that has gone dark. However, you cannot hide an object that thousands of amateur astronomers are tracking with backyard telescope, EAS, and the backyard data is screaming that something is wrong. 3 Atlas is not where it is supposed to be. The deviation is small. We're talking about a right ascension drift of 0.4. To the naked eye, that is nothing. It is the width of a pinky finger held at arm's length. But in orbital dynamics, over a distance of millions of km, a 0.4 shift is not a drift. It is a turn. If you fire a bullet and it lands into the left of the target, it might be wind. If it lands 2 meters to the left, the gun was pointed somewhere else. To change the inclination of an orbit, to change the tilt of the path, is the most expensive maneuver in space flight. It requires a massive change in velocity. We call it plane change energy. It is why we launch satellites from Florida to get into equatorial orbits and from California to get into polar orbits. You use the rotation of the Earth to help you because doing it with engines alone takes too much fuel. 3I Atlas is already moving at hypervelocity. To shift its vector by nearly half a degree, while moving that fast requires a lateral thrust component that is staggering. It is not just speeding up or slowing down, it is pushing sideways. Why would a rock push sideways? It wouldn't. It couldn't. The non-gravitational acceleration that NASA likes to talk about, the Aoski effect, is caused by sunlight heating one side of a rotating asteroid. The heat radiates off and gives it a tiny, tiny push. We are talking about a push that moves an asteroid a few km over decades. 3 Atlas moved thousands of km off course in days. The Aoski effect is a gentle breeze. This was a shove, and the direction of the shove is critical. It wasn't random. The turn has placed 3I Atlas on a new trajectory and this is the part that should make the hair on the back of your neck stand up line with the ecliptic plane. Remember, the object came in at a steep angle. It was plunging down from the north. The turn is flattening that dive. It is shallowing out the angle. It is trying to merge with the traffic of the solar system. If you are an interstellar traveler and you just want to pass through, you stay high. You stay out of the plane of the planets to avoid debris, gravity wells, and collisions. You dive in, swing around the star, and leave. But if you're interested in the locals, if you want to scan the 3rd rock from the sun or the 4th, you get into the plane. You get onto the same level as the planets. This maneuver, this flattening of the inclination, is exactly what an orbital insertion looks like. It is not a capture maneuver. It is still moving too fast to stop, but it is an alignment maneuver. It maximizes the time of closest approach to the planets. Let's connect this to the anti-tail and the blue shift. The blue plasma jet we saw was pointing at the sun. That provides the braking force. But if you vector that nozzle, if you tilt that engine just a fraction of a degree, you get a lateral component. You get a turn. The timing of the turn correlates perfectly with the missing 11 minutes and the radio burst. The burst was the ignition. The blue shift was the burn. The missing data was the evidence of the maneuver. And now we are seeing the result. The position error. The amateur community is calling it the dog leg. A dog leg is a turn in a course. The plotted path of 3 Atlas now has a kink in it, a knee. Nature does not make knees. Gravity makes smooth curves. I ran the numbers through a Monte Carlo simulation, throwing every possible natural variable at it. Outgassing, no. The force is too weak. Collision, no. There is no debris cloud. Gravitational interaction with a hidden planet, no. Unless there is a black hole hiding behind Mercury that we missed. There is that number again, 11 minutes. The consistency of the data across different disciplines is terrifying. The radio astronomy points to an 11-minute burst. The image timestamps show an 11-minute gap. The orbital deviation requires an 11-minute burn. It is a closed loop of evidence. And where does this new path take us? The old trajectory had 3I Atlas passing harmlessly into the outer dark, staying well above the plane of the planets. The new trajectory brings it significantly closer to the orbit of Earth. I am not saying it is going to hit us. We will get to the collision course calculations later, but it is bringing it into a surveillance window. By flattening its orbit, 3I Atlas extends the time it spends in our neighborhood. It stays closer for longer. It is the difference between a car driving past your house at 60 miles per hour and a car slowing down and pulling into the breakdown lane to watch your front door. The mainstream media is completely silent on this turn. They are still reporting the old ephemeris data. They are showing the smooth predicted lines. But go to the forums. Look at the raw observations from Australia, where the viewing is best right now. The astronomers down there are scratching their heads. They are having to manually guide their telescopes because the automated tracking based on their NASA numbers is drifting off target. The object is drifting west. One observer noted at the telegram correction of 20 arc seconds required per hour. That drift is the turn happening in real time. We are watching a celestial body change its mind. And what is the reaction from the authorities? They have shut down the public access to the JPL Horizon system, the web tool that lets you calculate orbits. It is down for maintenance. Convenient timing. Every time a discrepancy appears, the tools we use to verify it go offline. But they cannot turn off the sky. They cannot turn off the geometry. We have to consider the dark forest implications here. Just as a side note, if you are a vessel in a hostile universe, you don't maneuver unless you have to. Maneuvering reveals your capabilities. It reveals your mass by how fast you can turn. It reveals your engine power. You only maneuver if the mission profile demands it. What mission profile demands a 4-degree plane change after Pearl? Scanning, perhaps? Communication. Maybe the term was to align a high-gain antenna with a receiver in a distant star system. Or avoidance. Did 3 Atlas see something it didn't like? Did it detect a hazard? Or did it detect us and decide to get a better look? The turn is the moment the passive became active. It is the moment the rock became a ship. And as we look at the new path, we have to ask, what is the next waypoint? The leaked orbital data is not just numbers on a page. It is the flight plan of an alien visitor. And that flight plan has just been updated. As we move to the next chapter, we need to ask a fundamental question about the object itself. If it has engines, if it has a shield, if it can turn, how big is it really? The NASA estimates say it is a few km wide, but the mass required to generate the gravity for a turn, or the volume required to hold the fuel for that blue flame, the math isn't adding up. We are about to investigate the hollow shell theory because if the density numbers are right, 3I Atlas is lighter than air, and that is impossible for a rock. But it is perfect for a spaceship. The turn was the action. The mass is the structure. And we're about to find out that this thing is mostly empty space, or mostly rooms. Stay tuned. The trajectory is changing, and so is our understanding of reality. The hollow shell, mass spectrometry versus volume. The density math that does not add up. If you pick up a rock on the beach, you know what it should feel like. It has heft. It has density. If you picked up that same rock and it felt like a piece of styrofoam, your brain would instantly tell you, this is fake. This is hollow. In astronomy, we pick up objects using math. We measure their size by how much light they block or reflect. We measure their mass by how much they pull on other objects or by how they rotate. And when we apply this math to 3I Atlas, the result we get is the cosmic equivalent of a styrofoam rock. We are being told that 3I Atlas is a large cometary nucleus. The latest size estimates based on the blockage of background stars a technique called occultation. Put the diameter at roughly 20 kilometers. That is big. That is the size of a major city. A rock that size should weigh billions of tons. It should be a gravitational anchor. But here is the problem. It is not pulling. We have gathered tracking data from the small asteroids and dust clouds that 3I Atlases pass near. When a massive object passes a smaller one, it tugs on it. The path of the small object bends. By measuring that bend, we can weigh the large object. It is a cosmic scale. The results from the perturbation analysis are leaking out of the European Space Agency, and they are baffling. 3I Atlas exerts almost zero gravitational influence on its surroundings. The perturbations are negligible. If you take the volume of a 20-kilometer sphere and you give it the mass implied by the lack of gravity, you get a density calculation that breaks physics. The density comes out to something like 0.1 grams per centimeter. For context, water is 1 gram per centimeter. Solid ice is about 0.9. Rock is 3 or 4. Iron is 8.0.1. That is the density of balsa wood or a gel, or a rigid shell containing a vacuum. A natural comet is a rubble pile. It is loose rocks and ice held together by weak gravity. Rubble piles have voids. Sure, they can be porous, but they cannot be 90% empty space. If they were, they would crumble under their own rotation. They would fly apart. 3I Atlas is rotating rapidly. We know this from the light curve flashing. If it were a fluffy ball of dust with the density of cotton candy, the centrifugal force of its spin would have torn it into a ring of dust long ago. But it is solid. It is holding its shape. It is enduring the tidal forces of the sun. So, we have a paradox. Fact 1, it is huge, 20 kilometers. Fact 2, it is extremely light, low gravity. Fact 3, it is structurally rigid, surviving spin and solar tides. There's only one structure in engineering that satisfies all three of those conditions. A hollow shell, a honeycomb, a lattice. A structure designed to maximize volume while minimizing mass. This is not how geology works. Geology is lazy. Gravity pulls everything into the tightest, densest ball possible. Evolution and engineering, however, build scaffolding. They build frameworks. The hollow shell theory is gaining traction in the underground physics boards because it explains the blue shift and the turn we talked about. If the object is low mass, it is easier to push. A low-mass object requires less energy to accelerate. That 0 point for turn becomes much more plausible if you're pushing a balloon rather than a bowling ball. And let's talk about the mass spectrometry part of the headline. When we look at the surface composition, we see the usual suspects, carbon silicates, but the ratios are wrong. The surface area to mass ratio is off the charts. When a comet outgasses, the rate at which it loses mass is tied to its surface area. A big comet vents more gas. 3 Atlas is venting gas, but the recoil from that venting, the push it gets from the jets, is much higher than it should be for a heavy rock. Think about a balloon. If you let the air out of a balloon, it flies around the room wildly. Why? Because the balloon is light. If you put a brick inside the balloon and let the air out, it barely moves. The air pressure isn't enough to push the mass of the brick. 3 Atlas is reacting to its jets like the balloon, not the brick. This phenomenon, the non-gravitational acceleration, is being observed to be 10 times higher than predicted. NASA says unusually active outgassing. I say low inertial mass. The object is behaving as if it's a shell, a hull. Let's look at the Oumuamua precedent. Remember our first interstellar visitor? It was also weirdly shaped cigar or pancake and exhibited non-gravitational acceleration. A vibe, the Harvard professor, suggested it might be a light sail, a thin hollow membrane. 3I Atlas feels like the big brother of Oumuamua, the mothership to the probe. If it is a ship, why hollow? Is it a generation ship? A spinning cylinder creating artificial gravity on the inside? A 20-kilometer cylinder spinning at the rate 3I Atlas is spinning would generate a comfortable point. 5 Gs of gravity on the inner surface. It would be a habitat. Or is it a fuel tank? A spent stage? Maybe it is just the empty casing of something that dropped its payload a billion years ago. But the activity, the radio signals, the blue flame, suggests it is not dead. It is very much alive. We also need to consider the resonant frequency data. This is the bit technical, but stay with me. When the solar wind hits an object, it can make it vibrate, like a bell ringing in the breeze. The seismometers on our solar probes can pick up these subtle oscillations. In the solar magnetic field caused by the object's vibration, solid rocks thud. They have a low, dull resonance. Hollow spheres ring. They have a high Q factor. They vibrate for a long time. There are reports, unconfirmed but persistent, that the magnetic wake of 3 Atlas shows a ringing signature, a harmonic oscillation that implies a rigid hollow structure. It is ringing like a bell the size of Manhattan. This hollow shell reality changes the collision calculations too. If, heaven forbid, it were to hit a planet, a hollow structure would do less damage than a solid asteroid. It would break up high in the atmosphere. It would be a Tunguska event, not a dinosaur killer. Maybe that is by design, a safety feature. Or maybe it just means it is fragile. But fragile things don't survive closest approaches to the sun unless they are made of something stronger than rock. The spectral analysis of the surface shows unknown absorption lines in the UV spectrum. We assumed it was some exotic ice. But what if it is an alloy? A metamaterial, a carbon nanotube weave that is light as air but stronger than steel. We are looking at a styrofoam rock that is flying through fire, screaming on the radio and turning left. The density math is the final nail in the coffin of the dirty snowball theory. Snowballs are not hollow. Snowballs do not ring. And as we peel back the layers of this onion, or rather realize there are no layers, just a void inside, we have to wonder, what is inside the shell? If it is a habitat, who is home? If it is a tank, what was the fuel? If it is a machine, where is the bridge? The hollow shell leads us directly to the question of control. A hollow object is unstable. It wobbles. It drifts. To keep it stable, to keep it pointing its anti-tail at the sun, you need active attitude control. This brings us to the next chapter, the cellular motion. The SOHO data isn't just showing a blue glow. It is showing a movement pattern that looks less like orbital mechanics and more like biology or intent. It is not tumbling. It is orienting. It is watching. The shell is empty of rock, but it is full of purpose. The cellular motion, SOHO data analysis suggests controlled orientation, not random tumbling. When you look at a dead leaf falling from a tree, it flutters. It is chaotic. It is at the mercy of the wind. But when you look at a bird diving or a bacteria moving toward a sugar source, the motion is different. 3I Atlas is not tumbling. Now you might say, so what? The moon doesn't tumble. It is tidally locked. That is true. But tidal locking takes millions of years of gravitational friction to achieve. You don't just show up in a solar system moving at hyperbolic speeds and instantly lock your face to the star. That is physically impossible for a natural object. To stop a tumble requires energy damping. It requires internal friction. And yet, 3I Atlas has kept its nose, the end opposite the blue flame we discussed, pointed dead center at the sun for the entire duration of its perihelion passage. But it is not the locking that is the cellular part. It is the jitter. If you stabilize a camera on a tripod, it is perfectly still. If you hold a camera in your hand, even if you are a sniper, there is a micro tremor. Your muscles are constantly firing to correct the position. This is called a feedback loop. The tracking data for 3I Atlas shows a feedback loop every 4 minutes. Like a heartbeat, there is a micro correction in the object's attitude. It drifts slightly, perhaps due to the solar wind pressure, and then snap. It corrects. It pulls back into alignment. A distinct, sharp angular momentum adjustment that happens faster than gravity could ever allow. We are calling it cellular motion because it mimics the behavior of single-celled organisms under a microscope. When a premium detects a chemical gradient, it doesn't just drift. It twitches, it adjusts, it biases its random walk to move toward the food. 3 Atlas appears to be biasing its orientation to maximize what? Shielding, energy collection, or perhaps it's pointing a sensor. Let's look at the Janubov effect. This is a phenomenon in physics where a spinning object in zero gravity will periodically flip its axis. It is unstable. It is a rule of rigid body dynamics. If 3 Atlas were a simple spinning hollow shell as we theorized, it should be flipping. It should be chaotic. The fact that it is maintaining a stable sun-facing attitude despite the massive external forces implies that it has an internal angular momentum system fighting the physics. Gyroscopes, massive ones, or fluid loops. In biology, we have the inner ear. In engineering, we have reaction wheels. Both serve the same purpose, to tell you which way is up and keep you there. The 4-minute twitch we are seeing matches the cycle time of a high saturation reaction control system dumping momentum. This is where the living metaphor gets disturbing. A rock doesn't care if it gets hot, doesn't care if the solar wind strips its surface, but a cell cares. A machine cares. This object is behaving like it has a survival instinct, is actively managing its exposure to the solar environment. The SOHO images also reveal something that the scrubbed high-res images probably showed in detail. The comet isn't round. It is shaped like a shock cone, but the cone changes shape in sync with the twitches. Imagine an umbrella. When you point it into the wind, it is a shield. If you tilt it, the wind catches it. The coma of 3 Atlas expands and contracts rhythmically. It suggests that the shield, that blue plasma barrier, is being modulated. Is it breathing? No, but it is cycling. The frequency of these cycles, the twitch, the expansion, the contraction, aligns with a frequency of 0.00 Hz. In the world of signal processing, that is very low frequency. But in the world of biology, that is the frequency of a large slow heartbeat or a system running a diagnostic loop. We have to ask ourselves, what is the stimulus? A cell moves because it senses something. What is 3I Atlas sensing? The data suggests it is reacting to solar flares. Yesterday, the sun released an M-class flare. Not a monster, but a significant burst of rays and protons. It takes light 8 minutes to get to 3 Atlas. It takes the particles a few hours. Exactly 8 minutes after the flare erupted on the sun, traveling at the speed of light, 3 Atlas performed its most aggressive maneuver yet. It rotated. It didn't just twitch. It rolled. It presented a different face to the incoming radiation. How did it know the particles hadn't hit it yet? The only way it could react that fast is if it saw the flash. It detected the X-ray spike and preemptively reoriented its hold to protect a sensitive area or perhaps to charge a different bank of collectors. Rocks do not have eyes. They do not see flares and duck. This precognitive motion, this reaction to the speed of light information before the physical blow arrives, is the hallmark of intelligence or at least automated defense systems. It is the difference between a boxer getting hit and a boxer slipping the punch because he saw the shoulder move. 3I Atlas slipped the punch. And the mainstream astronomers, they are trying to call it radiation pressure torque. They argue that the flash of light hit the object and twisted it. But the math fails. Light pressure is weak. To twist a 20 kilometers object that quickly using just the pressure of sunlight would require the sun to go supernova. It didn't. The force came from within. The cellular motion implies a distributed associated intelligence. We aren't necessarily talking about little green men on a bridge. We could be looking at a smart material, a whole that acts as both skin and brain. Piezoelectric sensors embedded in the shell that trigger a reflex action. Think of it like a Venus flytrap. It doesn't have a brain, but it snaps shut when you touch it. 3 Atlas snaps its orientation when the sun touches it. But here is the dark turn. If it reacts to the sun, does it react to us? And we have been hitting it with radar, and we've been hitting it with LiDAR. We have been touching it with our sensors. There is a correlation, and I use this word carefully, between the moments we sweep it with high-power planetary radar and the moments it twitches. The Goldstone Deep Space Communications Complex in California hit 3I Atlas with a megawatt radar pulse at 1400 hours yesterday. At 1400 hours and 30 seconds, the object's rotation rate changed by 2%. Did we tickle it, or did we annoy it? If this motion is cellular, if it is a response to stimulus, then we are currently poking a sleeping bear with a laser pointer to see if it wakes up, and the bear is starting to twitch. The random tumbling narrative is dead. You didn't statistically accidentally point your heat shield at the sun for 2 weeks straight, while dodging flares. That is intent. And as we watch this thing orient itself, we have to wonder what it is looking at now. Because after the flare passed, it didn't go back to its original position. It stayed rotated. It is now pointing its long axis, the fuselage, if you will, along a vector that intersects with the orbit of Jupiter. Why Jupiter? Jupiter is a gravity well. It is a slingshot, but it is also a shield, a massive magnetosphere that protects anything inside it. Is it running for cover, or is it rendezvousing? The motion is fluid, it is organic, and it is terrifyingly precise. We are watching a dance of physics and engineering that is so seamless, it looks like life. But there is a byproduct to all this maneuvering. All this twitching and rolling requires signals, internal commands. An internal commands leak, which brings us to the silence. Not the silence of the object, but the silence of the people listening to it. Because while 3i Atlas is twitching, the observatories on Earth are going dark one by one. The live feeds are cutting. The webcams are freezing. They tell us it is maintenance. They tell us it is network congestion. But you don't take down the entire deep space network for maintenance. When the most important object in history is making a course correction, we're about to investigate the silence protocol. Because the reason they are shutting down the feeds isn't because the cameras are broken. It is because they are working too well. They are picking up the noise of this cellular motion, the electronic hum of a nervous system the size of a city. And that hum is interfering with more than just our telescopes. The cellular motion proves it is awake. The silence proves they know it. And now we are going to find out why the pilots of our own aircraft are reporting static on the guard frequencies whenever 3i Atlas faces Earth. The twitch is a transmission, and we are being jammed. The silence protocol. Why independent observatories reported interference during the Mars flyby. There is a sound that every radio operator knows. It is not the static of the atmosphere, and it is not the clean sine wave of a broadcast. It is the angry, buzzing, chaotic noise of a jammer. It is the sound of a frequency being smothered. And for the last week, that sound has been ringing in the ears of every independent radio telescope operator in the southern hemisphere. We talked about the cellular motion and the twitch. We established that 3 Atlas is maneuvering. But maneuvering requires telemetry. It requires internal chatter. And when you have a machine the size of a mountain talking to itself, it tends to shout. The official story is solar interference. They tell us that the sun is active and the charged particles are messing with our reception. It is a convenient excuse. It covers to us a multitude of sins. But solar interference is broadband. It affects everything equally. It washes out the sky like a rainstorm. What the observatories in Chile and Australia are reporting is not broadband. It is notch interference. Specific frequencies used for deep space communication are being obliterated by high-power noise, while the frequencies right next to them are crystal clear. This is the silence protocol, but it is not a protocol that we initiated. It is a protocol that is being imposed upon us. They heard the woodpecker. For those of you old enough to remember the Cold War, the Russian woodpecker was a massive over-the-horizon radar that tapped on the radio bands like a jackhammer. The signal coming from the direction of 3 Atlas sounds like a digital version of that. It is a rapid-fire pulse transmission that scans through the band and span frequencies. It looks for all the world like an active electronic countermeasure suite. It looks like jamming. Why would an interstellar object jam us? Think about radar. To track an object, we bounce radio waves off it. We paint it. If the object doesn't want to be painted, it can absorb the wave's stealth, or it can shout back louder jamming. 3 Atlas is shouting back. Every time a planetary radar tries to get a lock for a distance measurement, this woodpecker signal spikes. It floods the receiver with noise, making it impossible to get a clean return. This is why the distance data in the public logs has been so erratic. We aren't getting clean bounces. We're getting ghost returns. I spoke off the record to a technician at the Very Large Array. He told me that the interference pattern has a structure. It is reactive. If they shift the radar frequency up by 1 megahertz, the jamming signal follows it instantly. It is frequency hopping. Nature does not frequency hop. Pulsars pulse, but they stay on their channel. They don't chase you up and down the dial. To chase a frequency requires a receiver to listen, computer to process, and a transmitter to adjust. It is a tactical behavior. This implies that 3i Atlas considers our radar scans to be hostile acts, or at least intrusive ones. And the silence protocol extends to the optical feeds as well. Have you noticed that the live streams from the International Space Station have been cutting to blue screens more often than usual. Every time the station's orbit brings it into a line of sight with the object, the feed cuts. Loss of signal, they say. But the telemetry shows the tracking and data relay satellites are perfectly aligned. There is no reason for a signal loss unless the signal is being blocked. There is a theory floating around the dark web called the firewall hypothesis. It suggests that 3I Atlas is generating an ionization cloud around itself, that blue plasma sheath we discussed specifically to block RF transmission. A Faraday cage made of fire. If you are inside a plasma bubble, radio waves can't get in and they can't get out. It is why our re-entry capsules lose contact for a few minutes when they come back to Earth. The air gets too hot, but 3 Atlas isn't entering an atmosphere. It is in a vacuum. To maintain a communication blackout bubble in a vacuum requires constant energy. It is a deliberate cone of silence. However, the jamming suggests the bubble is permeable. The woodpecker is getting out. So, it is a one-way mirror. It can scream at us, but we can't shout at it. The interference is also having a physical effect on our assets. There are reports of single-event upsets on the satellites that are nowhere near the object, but are in its line of sight. Glitches, reboots, bit flips. This suggests the jamming signal is not just loud, it is energetic. It is carrying enough power to induce currents in unshielded wiring thousands of miles away. It is a directed energy weapon, colloquially speaking. Not designed to destroy maybe, but certainly designed to disrupt. The silence protocol is effective. It has blinded our best sensors. It has muddied the data. It has forced us to rely on optical tracking, which is easily fooled by the anti-tail and the blue shift anomalies. We are trying to study a magician who keeps shining a flashlight in our eyes. And amidst this electronic chaos, a whistleblower has emerged. A signal processing engineer from a major aerospace contractor. She didn't leak the raw data that would get her arrested. She leaked the errorable logs. The logs show that the noise floor of the jamming signal contains a carrier wave, and encoded on that carrier wave is a sequence of integers. Prime numbers. No, that is the movie version. The reality is stranger. The integers correspond to the atomic masses of elements, but not just any elements. The sequence repeats. Technium, promethium, plutonium, elements that do not exist naturally in stable forms. Elements that must be manufactured. Is it a menu? A warning? Or is it simply the exhaust signature of the engine being broadcast as telemetry? The silence protocol is not empty silence. It is a wall of noise designed to hide the conversation. And while the mainstream media sleeps, lulled by the solar interference lie, the radio operators are recording every pop, hiss, and click. We are building a library of these sounds, and eventually we will decode the syntax of the static. But for now, the message is clear. Stop looking. 3I Atlas has put up a do not disturb sign, and it is backing it up with an electronic warfare suite that would make a superpower jealous. As we move to the next chapter, we are going to look at what happens when we do manage to get a peek behind the curtain. Because despite the jamming, despite the silence, a few photons managed to hit a spectrograph that wasn't scrubbed. The leak spectrograph is the smoking gun of physical composition. If the radio signal tells us it is a machine, the spectrograph tells us what the machine is made of. And spoiler alert, it isn't rock. The leak spectrograph, whistleblower claims of non-terrestrial alloys. Chemistry is the ultimate truth teller. You can fake a radio signal, you can fake a photograph, but you cannot fake an absorption line. Every element in the universe absorbs light at very specific, immutable wavelengths. It is a fingerprint. Hydrogen always looks like hydrogen. Iron always looks like iron. There is no suing quantum mechanics. So, when a spectrograph from the Keck Observatory in Hawaii leaks onto a Papin-D site, and that spectrograph shows absorption lines that do not match any known natural mineral, you have to pay attention. The document in question is a RAW file flexible image transport system. It is the standard format for astronomical data. It is dated November 18th. The target is 3I Atlas. The instrument is the higher spectrometer. In a normal comet, you see the swan bands. These are the spectral signatures of carbon, cyanogen, and water. They are the chords of the song that every comet sings. 3I Atlas is singing those chords. Yes, but it is also singing notes that shouldn't be on the keyboard. The leak highlights a cluster of absorption lines in the ultraviolet part of the spectrum. These lines are deep. They are sharp. They indicate the presence of a heavy metal. But when you run them against the NIST Atomic Spectrum database, they don't lock onto a single element. They lock onto a complex. The whistleblower, who goes by the handle sector, claims these lines correspond to a high-entropy alloy. Let me explain what that is. In nature, metals usually mix in simple ways. You get an alloy where one metal is the base, like iron, and another is sprinkled in like carbon to make steel. Nature rarely mixes 5 or 6 elements in equal proportions. It is thermodynamically difficult. But in advanced metallurgy, we create high-entropy alloys. We mix 5 or more elements: aluminum, cobalt, chromium, iron, nickel in equal atomic percentages. These alloys are incredibly strong. They are resistant to heat. They are resistant to radiation. They are the stuff you build starships out of. The spectral signature of 3 Atlas shows a perfect equal atomic distribution of ruthenium, osmium, iridium, and here is the kicker: hafnium. Hafnium is a neutron absorber. We use it in the control rods of nuclear reactors to stop the reaction. You do not find hafnium floating around in comets. It is rare to find it mixed perfectly with iridium and osmium in a high-entropy lattice. Implies a manufacturing process. It implies a whole design to withstand the hellish conditions of interstellar space, and perhaps the radiation of a propulsion system. The presence of these lines changes everything. A rock is a random collection of stardust. An alloy is a choice. Someone chose these elements. Someone smelted them. Someone forged them. And the leak spectrograph reveals something else. There is a shift in the lines, a stark broadening. This is a phenomenon that happens when atoms are subjected to intense electric fields. The electron orbitals get distorted and the spectral lines get fuzzy. The stark broadening observed in the hafnium lines is massive. It suggests that the hull of 3I Atlas is charged, not just a little static electricity from the solar wind, but charged to millions of volts. This connects back to the silence protocol and the plasma shield. If the hull is a charged plate, it supports the theory that the object is using electrostatic repulsion to deflect debris or radiation. It is an active shield. The mainstream scientists are trying to dismiss the leak. They say the file is corrupted or fake. They say the lines are just noise artifacts, but the noise is too regular. It is too precise. And the whistleblower included the calibration frames that control data, which proves the instrument was working perfectly. There is also the matter of the missing iron. In a standard meteorite, iron and nickel are best friends. They're always found together. The ratio is predictable. The leak shows an abundance of nickel, but a depletion of iron. Where did the iron go? If you're building a ship, you use the iron. You refine it. Maybe the iron is deep inside, forming the frame, shielded by the exotic alloy skin. The spectrograph only sees the surface. It sees the skin, and the skin is made of something that cost more per ounce than gold. We are looking at a gold-plated comet, or rather an iridium-plated one. I want to introduce a curiosity spike here. There is a concept called techno-signatures. Usually we look for radio waves like Merkit found, or Dyson spheres, giant structures blocking stars. But there is a subset of SETI that looks for industrial pollution. They look for chlorofluorocarbons or artificial isotopes in the atmospheres of exoplanets. The signature we are seeing, this specific blend of refractory metals, is a solid-state techno-signature. It is the chemical fingerprint of advanced manufacturing. It is like finding a plastic bottle on a deserted island. You do need to see the person who dropped it to know that nature didn't make the plastic. 3 Atlas is a plastic bottle in the ocean of space. The implications of this alloy are terrifying for the collision scenario. If this thing hits us, it won't break up like a ball of ice. It will punch through the atmosphere like a kinetic penetrator. It has the density of a shell, as we discussed in Chapter 6, but the structural integrity of a tank. But the alloy also explains how it survived the sun. A normal comet would have crumbled under the tidal forces and the heat. An iridium-hafnium shell, it would barely get warm. It explains the survival. It explains the turn. A rigid structure can take the stress of a hygiene maneuver. A rubble pile cannot. The leak spectrograph is the bridge between the ghost stories of radio signals and the hard reality of matter. It proves that there is something solid, something manufactured, and something incredibly resilient passing through our system. And now we have to. Where is it taking that resilient hull? The trajectory has been flattened. The engines have fired. The jamming is active. The alloy is holding strong. All signs point to a specific date, a specific rendezvous. The models are converging. The dog-leg maneuver put 3I Atlas on a path that brings it uncomfortably close to the Earth's orbital position on December 19th. We're about to talk about the approach, the moment where the theory meets the reality, the moment where we stop looking at pixels and start looking out the window. The mainstream media is telling you it will miss by millions of miles. They are using the old data. They are using the rock math. But we are using the ship math. And the ship math says something very different. Get ready, because the 19th of December is coming, and 3 to Atlas is running on time. December 19th approach, the collision course calculation. Mainstream media is ignoring December 19th. Mark it on your calendar. Circle it in red, because while the world is busy shopping for the holidays, looking down at their phones and worrying about the price of gas, our shadows racing toward the intersection of Earth's orbit and the ecliptic plane. The official NASA press releases, The ones they release on Friday afternoons to bury the news cycle assure us that 3 Atlas will pass at a safe distance of 0.8 astronomical units. That is roughly 74 million miles. It sounds safe. It sounds like a miss. But that calculation assumes a ballistic trajectory. It assumes the object is a rock that obeys gravity and nothing else. It ignores the turn. It ignores the anti-tail thrust. It ignores the cellular motion. If you factor in the 0.4-degree inclination change we saw on November the 15th, and you project that thrust vector forward, the missed distance shrinks. It shrinks rapidly. Independent orbital modelers using the leaked data and the non-gravitational parameters are generating a different set of numbers. They aren't predicting a direct impact. Let's not be alarmist, but they are predicting a close approach that brings 3I Atlas within the sphere of influence of the Earth-Moon system. We are talking about a flyby distance of less than 2 million miles. That is 8 times the distance to the Moon. In cosmic terms, that is a shave. That is a buzz. But it is not the collision with Earth that we need to worry about. It is the interaction. At that distance, the magnetic bubble of 3 Atlas, that terawatt plasma shield, will brush against the Earth's magnetosphere. We are going to feel it. We are going to see auroras at the equator. We are going to see satellite disruptions. The silence protocol jamming signal will be in our backyard. It will be loud enough to fry sensitive electronics. And there is the black swan variable, the braking maneuver. If 3 Atlas is a probe, and if it wants to enter a high orbit or deploy subprobes, December 19th is the braking window. It is the point of closest approach where a retro burn would be most effective to match velocities with Earth. If it lights up that blue engine again right next to us, the plasma exhaust alone could be a hazard. A plume stretching for 2 million kilometers comprised of ionized heavy metals and high-energy particles sweeping across our orbital lanes. It would be like a solar flare, but point blank. The mainstream media is ignoring the variable thrust scenarios. They only model the passive path. They are terrified of causing panic. But panic is just a lack of information. Preparation is the antidote to panic. We need to be watching the sky on the 19th, not just with telescopes, but with our eyes. If the blue engine fires, it will be visible in the daytime sky. It will be a second star, a blue star. And what if it doesn't stop? What if it keeps going? Then we have witnessed the greatest flyby in history. We have seen a traveler from the deep dark wave hello and move on to Jupiter. But the data suggests intent. The term was too precise. The alloy is too strong. The signal was too structured. This is not a random visitor. This is a mission. We are the natives on the beach watching the tall ships appear on the horizon. We don't know if they are explorers, conquerors, or just traders passing through. But we know they are not driftwood. The collision is not necessarily physical. It is ontological. It is a collision of worldviews. The moment 3I Atlas passes that point in the sky, the debate ends. The reality begins. We have looked at the radio signals that shouldn't exist. We have looked at the missing images. We have analyzed the physics of the anti-tail and the blue shift. We have weighed the hollow shell and tracked the cellular motion. We have heard the jamming and read the spectrographs. The evidence stack is towering. It casts a long shadow over the dirty snowball theory. 3 Atlas is a vessel. Whether it is manned, AI-controlled, or a derelict ghost ship, it is a product of intelligence. And on December 19th, it comes to say hello or goodbye. So, here we are at the end of the data, but the beginning of the event. I want you to go outside tonight. Find a quiet spot away from the street lights. Look up. Find the constellation Hydra. It is a long winding snake of stars in the southern sky. Somewhere in that dark expanse, a blue light is burning. A silent engine is pushing a hollow shell made of impossible metal through the void. It has traveled light years to be here. It has survived the birth and death of stars. And now it is sharing our solar system for a brief fleeting moment. We are small. We are fragile. We live on a pale blue dot suspended in a sunbeam. But we are curious. We have eyes that can see the invisible and minds that can unweave the rainbow. 3 Atlas is a mystery, but it is also a mirror. It reflects our fears, our hopes, and our desperate need to know that we are not alone in the dark. Maybe it will pass us by in silence. Maybe it will speak again.